The name is Bond. James Bond.
Underneath the candy sky, neon dreams and alibis, hearts get lost down alleyways where secrets ride the waves. Coated s'mores and sugar lies, children's toys with devil's eyes. A ghost train drags the truth to hell. He's ringing that dead man's bell. Blackpool lights, they flicker and fade. Spies and sinners in the masquerade. He deals in shadows sweet like sin. The candyman's game, and no one wins. Oh, no one wins. Beneath the pier, the deal goes down. Dressed to kill in a seaside town. Cotton candy, blood and steel. He spins the wheel, he makes you kneel. You thought you'd find romance or gold, but love is lethal when it's cold. This town don't care, this town don't cry. It sings your name before you die. Blackpool lights, they dance in vain, coated in tears and drenched in rain. The big wheel turns, the darkness grins, the candyman's game, and no one wins. No one wins in Blackpool's win. Not even Bond escapes that spin.
Hello there, it's Wilshie here bringing you a brand new and unique James Bond story. James Bond, Blackpool Lights by Wilshie Eckerslike. A full-length James Bond story in 6 parts. Chapter 1, Fog on the Golden Mile. Blackpool at midnight was a thing of strange beauty. The lights of the tower blinked like a broken beacon, lost in the mist rolling in from the sea. The promenade was nearly empty, just chip wrappers dancing in the wind and the slow churn of the tide. James Bond didn't like carnivals. He never had. The artificial joy, the forced cheer. It reminded him of funerals with clowns. Still, here he was, back in Britain's seaside playground, chasing whispers of a smuggling ring operating under the guise of amusements and sweets. MI6 had intercepted a signal, encrypted, Russian dialect, pinging from beneath the pleasure beach. Weapons, they suspected, but Q's briefing had gone further. They call him the Candyman. 707Q had said. Runs everything from rigged slot machines to black market mind control tech. Mind control? Bond had raised an eyebrow. Neural dampeners, Q replied. Devices that suppress emotional response. Anger, resistance, civil unrest. Imagine dropping one into a crowd of protesters. They'd go quiet, obedient, docile. Bond took the file. And where do I find him? He lives in the shadow of the tower. But you'll find him where the mirrors are warped. Nothing is quite what it seems. That was 12 hours ago. Now Bond was here. The last place he thought he'd be. Blackpool. Chapter 2. The Pleasure Beach Murders. The Pleasure Beach looked innocent enough by day. Candy floss machines churned sticky pink clouds. Families queued for the Big Dipper. Old men snored in striped deck chairs. But Bond was watching, and he'd spotted a pattern. Men in security jackets that didn't match the park's uniform. Crates being offloaded into maintenance doors behind the log flume. Surveillance cameras that weren't plugged in. He followed one of the men into the old wild mouse ride, closed for decades, supposedly condemned. Inside, beneath the broken tracks, a secret hatch, a tunnel, and beneath it an underground maze of smuggling routes. What he found chilled him. Racks of teddy bears with Kevlar linings, stalls full of stuffed unicorns with tiny silencer pistols stitched into their heads, and in a refrigerated room, a prototype dampener the size of a shoebox, pulsing with soft blue light. As Bond examined it, he felt a pressure on the back of his neck. "Don't touch that," said a woman's voice. Bond turned as she wore a red raincoat, black boots, and carried a knife. Delilah Rain, Interpol deep cover, missing for 3 weeks. "You're early," she said, lowering the knife. "You're lucky I'm late," Bond replied. "I've just found the reason MI6 sent me." She frowned. "That's not the worst of it. He's planning a live demonstration tonight. On the pier." Bond sighed. Of course he was. Chapter 3. The Candyman Can. He was charming, that was the problem. The Candyman wore a pastel suit and spoke with the voice of a late-night radio DJ. He handed out rock sticks laced with LSD. He controlled half of Blackpool's underworld and posed for photos with kids at the duck pond. Bond watched him from a booth on the central pier, sipping weak lager and listening to the man's voice through a tiny receiver clipped to the underside of a fake stall. Candyman was addressing buyers from Belarus, Syria, and a rogue Silicon Valley developer. "This is more than a device," he said. "This is influence. Imagine walking into a war zone and making it quiet. One switch, one pulse. Your enemies lose the will to fight." He placed the dampener on the table. "Let me show you." Bond saw Delilah move into position. She had a small EMP grenade tucked into her sleeve. But before she could act, "We have a guest," Candyman said softly. He looked directly at Bond's hidden camera. Bond stood. The trap had sprung. Lights exploded above the pier. Music kicked in, twisted carnival tunes remixed with war drums. Men in clown masks surged from behind booths with automatic rifles. "Ladies and gentlemen," Candyman called, "welcome to the last funfair of your life." Chapter 4. The Big One. The chase began on the tracks of the Big One, Blackpool's tallest coaster. Candyman fled in a custom cart. Bond followed, strapped to the front of another, armed with only a suppressed pistol and a hand grenade. Delilah hacked the ride from below, switching tracks, changing speed. The coaster became a battlefield in the sky. Wind howled, shots cracked. Bond leapt from cart to cart like a madman, firing into shadows. One of Candyman's guards screamed as he fell to his death near the Pepsi Max billboard. The final cart smashed through the tunnel exit and skidded onto the roof of the casino. Candyman tried to flee. Bond caught him and they fought on the rooftop, fists slamming into plaster statues and neon signs. Candyman swung a crowbar. Bond ducked, elbowed him in the ribs, and drew his knife. "You know," Candyman hissed, "people like me. You're just another ghost in a suit." Bond didn't answer. He kicked him, hard. Candyman flew backward, landing with a crunch on the giant plastic donkey in the amusement park entrance below. Dead. Chapter 5. End of the Pier. With the Candyman dead, the weapon sold to the Russians was still in play. Delilah and Bond hunted it through the arcades, dodging slot machines rigged with traps, claw arms swinging down like guillotines. In the back of a fortune teller booth sat the device, armed, countdown blinking. 60 seconds. Bond worked fast, sweat running down his brow. Delilah held off guards at the door, firing with a pistol retrieved from a hooker duck stand. 30 seconds, James. Bond traced the wiring, red to blue, green to white. He pulled the final wire. The light died. Outside, and police sirens finally echoed across the beach. Too late. Always too late. Chapter 6. Blackpool Lights. A day later, Bond sat alone in a fish and chip shop near the tower. Grease paper on the table, the smell of vinegar in the air. Delilah joined him, her face bruised, hair in a bun. They've cleared the tunnels. MI6 is taking credit, of course. Bond shrugged. Let them. We did the job. She sat down. Do you ever stop? He took a bite of his haddock. No. A silence, then she smiled. Salt? He handed her the shaker. She sprinkled it generously. Bond raised his eyes to the promenade. The lights were coming on, flashing red, blue, gold. 1,000 lies told in electric colour. But beneath it all, just for a moment, Blackpool seemed honest. And that was enough. Well, I hope that everyone enjoyed my story. It wasn't easy writing a Bond story set in Blackpool. As usual, please like, comment, subscribe, and remember, at Zains007Fancast, we do it better. The story unfolds in Blackpool, Britain's seaside resort town, where James Bond finds himself investigating a sinister operation beneath the carnival atmosphere. The narrative masterfully contrasts the town's gaudy entertainment facade with dark criminal undertones, opening with Bond's arrival at midnight as the famous Blackpool Tower pierces through dense coastal fog, its lights blinking like a broken beacon through the seaside mist. MI6 has intercepted encrypted Russian communications beneath the pleasure beach, leading Bond to investigate a figure known as the Candyman. During his briefing, Q explains that this criminal mastermind operates everything from rigged gambling operations to sophisticated mind control technology. The neural dampeners are particularly concerning. Devices capable of suppressing emotional responses, resistance, and civil unrest, effectively turning protesters docile and compliant with a single activation. Bond's investigation reveals the pleasure beach's sinister underbelly through careful observation of suspicious patterns, security personnel wearing non-standard uniforms, mysterious crates deliveries behind the log flume, and surveillance cameras that serve no actual function. Following, one suspicious guard leads him to the abandoned Wild Mouse ride, where he discovers an elaborate underground tunnel network beneath the supposedly condemned structure. The smuggling operation proves more sophisticated than initially suspected. Bond uncovers an arsenal disguised as carnival prizes, teddy bears with Kevlar linings, and stuffed unicorns concealing silenced pistols. In a refrigerated chamber, he finds a prototype neural dampener, glowing with an ominous blue light. And this discovery leads to his encounter with Delilah Rain, an Interpol agent who's been missing for 3 weeks while working undercover. She reveals the Candyman's plans for a live demonstration of the technology on the pier that very night. The Candyman himself presents a uniquely disturbing villain, a man who hands out LSD-laced rock candy while controlling Blackpool's criminal underground, all while maintaining a cheerful public persona. During a sales presentation to buyers from Belarus, Syria, and a rogue Silicon Valley developer, he promotes the dampener as a weapon of influence capable of pacifying entire conflict zones. The demonstration turns into a trap for Bond, with the pier erupting into chaos as armed men in clown masks emerge to the soundtrack of twisted carnival music mixed with war drums. A spectacular chase sequence unfolds on the big one, Blackpool's tallest roller coaster, with Bond pursuing the Candyman through a series of death-defying manoeuvres. Delilah provides crucial support by manipulating the track controls from below, while Bond leaps between carts, engaging in gunfire with the Candyman's guards. The pursuit culminates in a rooftop fight at the casino, where Bond's combat skills prove superior, ending with the Candyman's fatal fall onto a decorative donkey statue at the amusement park entrance. The story's tension peaks in the arcades, where Bond and Delilah must locate and disarm a neural dampener before its activation. The scene transforms familiar arcade attractions into deadly obstacles. Slot machines become traps, and claw games transform into lethal weapons. Working against a 60-second countdown, Bond methodically traces and disconnects the device's wiring, while Delilah holds off approaching guards using a pistol she retrieved from a hooker duck stand. The narrative's conclusion brings a moment of quiet reflection in a local chip shop, where Bond and Delilah discuss the aftermath of their mission. The tunnels have been cleared, and MI6 has claimed credit for the operation. The final image of Blackpool's lights illuminating the promenade, described as 1,000 lies told in electric colour, serves as a poetic metaphor for the story's themes of deception and appearance versus reality. This unique take on James Bond effectively leverages Blackpool's distinctive character to create an atmosphere where entertainment and danger intertwine. The story successfully incorporates traditional Bond elements, advanced technology, international intrigue, and high-stakes action, while grounding them in an unexpected British seaside location. The neural dampener plot device cleverly mirrors the story's setting, both dealing with the manipulation of emotions and the contrast between surface appearance and hidden reality. The author demonstrates particular skill in crafting action sequences, especially during the roller coaster chase and the arcade finale. The characterisation of the Candyman as a villain who weaponises carnival entertainment adds thematic depth to the narrative. The partnership between Bond and Delilah Rain is well developed, providing both tactical support and emotional resonance to the story. The integration of local landmarks and attractions into the plot demonstrates careful attention to setting details, making Blackpool itself feel like a crucial character in the narrative. From the iconic Blackpool Tower to the Pleasure Beach attractions, each location serves both the story's atmosphere and its action sequences. The transformation of familiar holiday attractions into venues for espionage and combat creates a unique tension between the familiar and the dangerous, perfectly suited to a James Bond adventure.
Underneath the candy sky, neon dreams and alibis, hearts get lost down alleyways, where secrets ride the waves, coated smiles and sugar lies, children's toys with devil's eyes. A ghost train drags the truth to hell. He's ringing that dead man's bell. Blackpool lights, they flicker and fade. Spies and sinners in the masquerade. He deals in shadows sweet like sin. The Candyman's game, and no one wins. Oh, no one wins. Beneath kill in a seaside town. Cotton candy, blood and steel. He spins the wheel, he makes you kneel. You thought you'd find romance or gold, but love is lethal when it's cold. This town don't care, this town don't cry. It sings your name before you die. Blackpool lights, they dance in vain, coated in tears and drenched in rain. The big wheel turns, the darkness grins, the candyman's game, and no one wins. No one wins in Blackpool's wind. Not even Bond escapes that spin. In the sands he's waiting. Through the mist, the gear is reaching like a dagger to the sea. Shadows stir where gulls are screeching, every wave a mystery. Underneath the lights still blinking, ghosts of laughter haunt the air. And a man keeps slowly walking to the danger waiting there. Every step's a wager, every glance could kill. In a town that hides its secrets, he's the only one who will. The sands of Southport, they'll swallow you whole, drag you under, body and soul, where the carousel turns and the night still burns. One man walks through the storm, and the sands of Southport keep him warm. Candy, rock, and poisoned whispers, every kiss a loaded game. In the hall of mirror shivers, not a soul will speak your name. Steel and rust scream in the shadows, coasters groan in winds that bite. Every sound a coded warning, every move could end tonight. In the glare of the midway, he can see the snare. Every mask a smiling traitor, every prize a cold affair. The sands of Southport, they'll swallow you whole, drag you under, body and soul, where the carousel turns and the night still burns. One man walks through the storm, and the sands of Southport keep him warm. In the funhouse, the laughter's gone, but the game plays on and on. Through the smoke and the flame, they still whisper his name, Bond, James Bond. On the pier, the tide is turning, shadows stretch across the day. but the fire still keeps burning till the tide can wash it away. One more dance, one more danger, one more secret left untold. In the cold arms of a stranger lies a heart of steel and gold. The sands of Southport, they'll never let go. They'll pull you down where no one will know, where the pier runs long and the night song strong. He'll be there facing the storm and the sands of Southport, the cold sands of Southport. Keep him warm, the tide will rise again.
James Bond, The Sands of Southport. Setting: Southport, Merseyside, faded gem of Victorian grandeur, where something sinister stirs beneath the pyre. From MI6 files once sealed to the public, comes a mission buried beneath the tides of time, a seaside town hiding something far deadlier than cockles and candy floss. Southport, once a playground for the upper crust, now the setting for James Bond's latest operation. This is The Sands of Southport. Scene 1, Arrival in the Mist. Bond stepped off the train at Southport Station, the late August air thick with sea mist. His Tom Ford suit was slightly too sharp for the Merseyrail platform, but Bond never worried about blending in. Southport? He muttered, not quite the Riviera, but MI6 hadn't sent him here for sunshine. He'd been briefed en route, a tech magnate by the name of Frederick Varnum, a recluse with suspected ties to arms dealers in Central Europe, had set up a tech incubator in a converted funhouse on the edge of the now semi-abandoned Southport's Pleasureland. Reports suggested he'd been testing something that scrambled naval frequencies along the Irish Sea. Disrupt the Navy? M had said, and you don't need guns, you control the channel. Scene 2, Shadows on the Pyre. Bond checked into the Bliss Hotel, the kind of place that tried very hard to forget the 1980s had ever happened. His room overlooked Southport Pier, the longest in Britain, stretching out like a dagger into the Irish Sea. Night fell. Bond walked the promenade. He passed slot machines still blinking, a few teenagers vaping in hoodies, and a busker playing a sad version of Live and Let Die on a battered accordion. Suddenly a woman approached. She wore a red raincoat, heels too sharp for the paving stones, and eyes that suggested both danger and regret. "You're late," she said. "I didn't realize I was expected." Bond replied, "MI6 always is." She handed him a small USB drive. "You've got one shot. Pleasureland, midnight. The fan house isn't for kids anymore." She turned, heels clicking on the wooden pyre, and vanished into the mist. Scene 3, into the funhouse. The gates to Southport Pleasureland creaked as Bond slipped through the side entrance. The place was eerie at night. Echoes of old laughter hung in the air, the skeletons of defunct rides looming in the dark, the cyclone, the ghost train, the derelict dodgems. Inside the funhouse, now converted into Varnum's lab, Bond found state-of-the-art tech. Servers blinked beneath candy-stripped walls. He inserted the USB. A screen flickered to life. "Project Never Sleep," it read. It was a cyber weapon, once capable of knocking out all the naval navigation systems within a 100-mile radius, the Irish Sea, the Slide shipyards, even Liverpool's port, blind and deaf, and it was going live at dawn. Behind him, a slow clap. "James Bond," said Frederick Varnum. descending a spiral slide repursed as a private entrance. You've ruined my surprise. He wore a white jumpsuit, too clean for someone who built weapons. His eyes glittered with fanaticism. You know, Bond said, turning, this really isn't cricket. No, Varnum smiled. This is war. Scene 4. Coasters and Carnage. Gunfire erupted. Bond rolled behind a giant fiberglass clown's head, returning fire with his Walther PPK. Varnum's guards, clad in old Pleasureland uniforms, swarmed in. Bond ducked through the hall of mirrors for a moment. He saw 30 reflections of himself, all calm and armed. Let's play then. Using the mirrors, Bond picked them off one by one. He emerged onto the defunct Wildcat coaster, now turned into a weapon testing rig. There, strapped beneath the coaster's tracks, was a drone, a platform armed with frequency jammers. You're too late, Mr. Bond, Varnum shouted over the wind. The skies are already waking up. Then let's give them a wake-up call. Bond sprinted up the tracks, dodging bullets and rusted bolts. He ripped the remote pack from the drone and smashed it with a fire extinguisher pulled from an old-right operator's booth. An explosion rocked the park. Flames lit up the night sky above Southport. Varnum's Empire and Project Never Sleep collapsed into smoke and screams. Scene 5. Farewell by the sea. The wind of the Irish Sea carried with it a low moan, like an old fairground organ left to rot. Bond stood alone at the end of the Southport pier, Britain's longest. The wooden planks beneath his polished shoes groaning with each shift of the tide. His suit jacket was slung over one shoulder, collar loose, shirt stained with ash and sweet seawater. The scent of burning circuit still clung faintly to his skin, mingling with the salty air. Behind him, the shot skeleton of Pleasureland was barely visible through the lingering mist, smoke curling above broken coasters, melted candy stalls, and the fun house whose laughter would never return. You don't look like someone who just saved the coastline, came a voice. Bond didn't turn around. He'd already sensed her approach, the faint scent of sandalwood, the click of sharp heels muted by the wooden planks. She stepped beside him, the woman in red. MI6 had given him the code name Red Wing, but Bond suspected she'd never needed saving, not even from himself. Mission reports already written, she said. MI6 wants you debriefed in London tonight. By tonight. Tell them I'm on holiday, Bond murmured. This doesn't look like holiday weather. Depends on your definition of fun, he said, glancing at her sideways. I find a bit of industrial sabotage oddly relaxing. She smiled and produced a long stick of pink Southport rock from her coat pocket. Thought you might want a keepsake. Bond took it, returned it in his hand. Bond, James Bond, he read aloud. All the way though, even the sugar can't hide that. So what now? She asked, watching the gull spiral above the wave. Bond looked out to sea. Far on the horizon, cargo ships sat still, their signals once scrambled by Varnum device, now humming back to life. A Royal Navy cutter sliced slowly through the water, glinting in the sun. Now Bond said the word forgets. Now, Bond said, the world forgets. The news will say it was a power surge, maybe a chemical fire in a disused warehouse. And you? I'll let Southport keep its secrets. We all have them. There was a long pause, only the wave filled in. You ever think about walking away? She asked. Bond laughed softly, a cold edge to it. Only when I'm nowhere near a cliff. She handed him a sealed envelope, no label, no stamp. From M, it's about your next assignment. Bond didn't open it. Let me guess, something exotic. Monaco, Cairo, somewhere with fewer haunted pyres. Maybe it's another seaside town with ghosts under the sand. He looked down at the letter, then folded it into his jacket pocket. I think I'll stay a while, maybe win a plush beer on Lord Street, or take in the model railway. She raised an eyebrow. You sentimental? Only when I've just blown up lunatics' drone army from a roller coaster. They stood there for a moment longer, two shadows against the rising sun. Then Bond turned, walking back down the pier. Slowly, deliberately, the tide pulled away beneath him, retreating from the town as if relieved to leave it behind. Behind him the gulls scattered. A police siren wailed in the distance, and the town of Southport, battered but intact, exhaled. Somewhere far off, the Bond theme played low, slow, as if even the orchestra needed a rest. And so the pier stands quiet again, but beneath its wooden planks and faded arcades, memoirs of fire, betrayal, and espionage linger like footprints in the sand. James Bond will return, but for now, Southport sleeps.
Beneath the towers, smoke and flame, a town of steel, a deadly game. The shadows move where secrets hide, and danger waits on the other side. Shadows in the steel, the fire burns deep, a secret too heavy for the night to keep. On walks alone through the furnace and storm. In Scunthorpe, the hunter is reborn. Ticking clock runs out of time. From silent streets to factory walls, the deadliest echo is when darkness calls. Shadows in the steel, the fire burns deep. Too heavy for the side to keep. One man against the rising storm. In Scunthorpe, the hunter is reborn. Shadows in the steel, the fire burns deep, a secret too heavy for the night to keep. One man against the rising storm. hunter is reborn. Shadows in the steel, Bond walks through fire and faded sea.
Hello everyone, it's Zane here from Zains007Fancast. Today we have a new local Bond story written by Wilshie. If you haven't yet, please check out James's adventures in Southport and Blackpool. Bond had been given his latest brief and now he was on his way. He knew nothing of Scunthorpe beyond what Holt had told him, and the little he'd heard didn't excite him. "I doubt there's a casino here," he muttered. The train rattled eastward out of Doncaster, carriages swaying with the old line's uneven rhythm. Bond sat by the window, long frame, composed but watchful, a folded newspaper resting beside him. The land grew flatter with each mile, ploughed fields, crooked hedgerows and villages huddled under the vast Lincolnshire sky. Twilight bled across the horizon, cooling towers rose like giants from the plain, exhaling smoke and mist. The air itself seemed tinged with iron, as though the land had absorbed a century of industry. Bond lit a Balkan Sobrani with practiced precision, the ritual steadying his thoughts. He disliked provincial postings. Industrial towns with their soot-black terraces and working men's clubs felt far from the Riviera or Istanbul. Yet experience had taught him that the most unassuming places often hid the deadliest shadows. As the train slowed, the silhouette of the Steelworks came into view. Chimneys, gantries and slag heaps piled like mountains, their sodium lights flickering against the dusk. This was not Monte Carlo, nor the Caribbean. This was Scunthorpe, and for now it was his battlefield. Chapter 1. Arrival in Scunthorpe. The platform at Scunthorpe station was quiet. A handful of men in overalls shuffled past with the weary gait of a long shift finished. A couple waited with shopping bags, talking in low voices. The station itself was a tired affair of concrete and brick, functional and joyless. Bond stepped down, his leather weekend case in hand. He was dressed in a dark grey suit, cut close but practical, and a black raincoat against the autumn chill. He looked like what he was pretending to be, a businessman on a short visit. Only the set of his shoulders and the pale, watchful eyes betrayed anything else. Outside, the taxi rank was almost deserted. A single hackney cab idled, its driver reading a paper. Bond gave an address, Redbourne Working Men's Club, and climbed inside. The cab pulled away. The town unfolded in dim street lamps, rows of terraces, corner shops with neon open signs, the glow of chip shops and curry houses. Beyond them, the towers of the steelworks loomed ever-present, red sparks flashing occasionally against the night sky. Bond lit another cigarette, inhaled, and allowed himself the faintest smile. It was not glamorous, not beautiful, but there was something in the air here, grit, industry, danger. He would find his quarry soon enough, and when he did, Scunthorpe would discover what it meant to have James Bond walking its streets. Chapter 2. The briefing at the Working Men's Club. The taxi rolled to a halt outside a low, soot-darkened building of brick and render. The sign above the door read, Redbourne Working Men's Club. Its old neon sign buzzing, its windows yellow with tobacco smoke. From within came the muffled sound of laughter, the thud of darts against cork, and the thin warble of a fruit machine. Bond paid the driver and stepped out. The street was narrow, hemmed in by terraces whose curtains twitched as he passed. Somewhere a dog barked, and the tang of chip fat clung to the air. It was a scene repeated in 100 northern towns, ordinary and unremarkable. Yet Bond felt the prickle of alertness that came before a mission's first contact. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with smoke and the smell of spilled beer. The ceiling was low, the carpet worn thin by years of heavy boots. Men in flat caps hunched over pints of bitter, their voices rough with accent and laughter. A jukebox in the corner struggled to be heard over the chatter. Bond attracted a glance or two, his suit marking him out as an outsider, but no one challenged him. He moved through to the back, where a door led to a quieter room. Here the noise was reduced to a distant murmur, A single table stood under a buzzing strip light. Behind it sat a young man in a grey suit that didn't quite fit, his tie loosened, his hair cropped short in military style. "Halt," the man said, rising slightly as Bond entered. His accent carried the Midlands, softened by London. Bond sat opposite, laying his case on the table. "You've drawn the short straw," he said dryly. Holt gave a thin smile. "I drew Scunthorpe, sir." Which may amount to the same thing. He slid a folder across. Bond opened it. Inside were production schedules, shipping manifests, and grainy photographs. Holt tapped the papers with a finger. "Here's the problem. Scunthorpe's steel output is down on paper, yet the furnaces are running at full tilt. Shipments leave the works, but they don't match the official records. Somewhere between here and the docks at Immingham, steel is disappearing, and not scrap either. We're talking high-grade plate steel, the kind used for armoured vehicles and heavy weapons." Bond flicked through the sheets. "Who's moving it?" Holt leaned back. "Name's Victor Dragan, Bulgarian, ex-military. He came over 5 years ago, set himself up with a scrapyard near Crosby. To most people, he's just another Eastern European businessman. But the volume of steel going missing, it has to be him. And he isn't working alone. Too organized." Bond closed the folder. "And the locals?" "They think he's a hard case. Keeps his head down, but people know better than to cross him. Cash-in-hand jobs, favours, intimidation. The works management turns a blind eye. Easier than asking questions." Bond lit a cigarette, his eyes narrowing through the smoke. "So Dragan's feeding British steel to someone abroad. Which means this isn't petty theft, it's strategic." "Exactly," Holt nodded. "We've traced containers as far as Odessa. 1 or 2 reached Tripoli. That makes it Spectre or something like it. Too clean otherwise." Bond ground out the cigarette. "Then we cut off the supply at the source." Holt lowered his voice. "One warning, sir. Scunthorpe's not Monte Carlo. It's a tight-knit town. Outsiders stand out. Dragan will know you're here within days." Bond allowed himself the faintest smile. "Then we'd better make the first move." Chapter 3. The Steelworks at Night. The works never truly slept. Even at 2 a.m, the furnaces burned with a steady roar, and the sky over Scunthorpe glowed faintly red as though the town itself smouldered. From a distance the towers loomed like cathedrals, their windows glowing, their chimneys vomiting white plumes into the autumn sky. Bond moved along the perimeter fence with a workman's gait. He wore overalls borrowed from Holt, the cap pulled low. In one hand he carried a battered thermos, in the other a clipboard. To anyone glancing at him, he was just another inspector trudging through the night shift. The air was heavy with sulphur and the acrid tang of hot metal. A train of wagons creaked past, piled high with glowing slag. Sparks showered from a gantry above where men in helmets worked with mechanical precision, their figures outlined in firelight. Bond slipped through a side door marked Authorized Personnel Only. Inside, the noise was deafening, the hiss of steam, the clang of hammers, the constant rumble of conveyors. He moved swiftly but unhurriedly, climbing a stairwell into the administrative block. Here, the smell of grease gave way to dust and paper. Bond found the office he wanted, a door marked Shipping Records. The lock yielded quickly to his picks. Inside, the room was dark save for the glow of a street lamp through grimy glass. Stacks of ledgers covered the shelves, their spines cracked, their pages greasy from 100 hands. Bond worked methodically. He flipped pages, scanned numbers, traced routes. It didn't take long to find the pattern: duplicate invoices, shipments marked as scrap, signatures that didn't match. Ghost cargoes vanished from the records only to reappear overseas. The fraud was bold and precise. He drew a miniature camera from his breast pocket and photographed each page with quiet clicks. 10 minutes later, he had enough to send a Treasury lawyer into apoplexy. But Bond was after more than paperwork. He wanted names. A sound stopped him, the scrape of boots outside. Bond slipped the camera away and moved to the door, flattening himself against the wall. The handle turned, the door creaked open, and a figure entered, broad-shouldered, oil-stained boiler suit, fists like anvils. The man saw the open ledger. His eyes narrowed. "You don't belong here." Bond struck fast, driving the edge of his hand into the man's throat. The thug staggered, choking, then swung a huge fist that smashed through a shelf, scattering papers. Bond ducked, countered with a knee to the ribs. The man bellowed and lunged, wrapping thick arms around him. They crashed against the desk, the ledger flying. Bond brought his elbow down twice, hard into the man's temple. The grip loosened. With a final heave, Bond drove him backwards into the filing cabinets. The man collapsed in a heap, groaning. Bond straightened, breathing hard. He adjusted his cap, retrieved the camera, and slipped out. The works continued around him, indifferent to the struggle. Sparks fell like stars, the furnaces roared, and James Bond vanished into the steel-smelling night. Chapter 4. The Club. The Redbourne Working Men's Club looked almost ordinary from the outside, a squat brick building with frosted windows and a flickering neon sign. But Bond knew better. Ordinary places were where power liked to hide. Inside, the air was thick with smoke and the sour-sweet tang of stale beer. A jukebox wheezed out a soul number barely heard above the chatter. Miners and steelworkers crowded the snooker table, voices rough with laughter. Bond ordered a whiskey. The barman poured black and white without asking, and let his eyes wander casually. He noted exits, faces, and the shadowed balcony above. His training told him at once which men belonged and which did not. The locals leaned back, easy in their own territory. The outsiders watched too closely, shoulders tight, eyes sharp. One of them was unmistakable. A tall man, pale, with a suit too sharp for the room and movements too controlled. His slicked back hair and knife-thin smile marked him as someone accustomed to command. Two heavy men flanked him, and a woman in a crimson dress leaned at his side. Dragon. He looked younger than Bond expected. Early 40s perhaps, but his eyes were hard, old, shaped by discipline and cruelty. Bond didn't move at first. He sipped his whiskey, lit a cigarette, and waited until Dragon's gaze slid across the hall. Recognition wasn't of faces, but of type. Predators always recognized their own. When the moment came, Bond crossed the room with unhurried confidence, a ribbon of smoke trailing behind him. "Mr. Dragon," he said smoothly, his voice cutting through the chatter. The Balkan smuggler looked up, pale eyes narrowing. His accent carried only a ghost of the East. "You have me at a disadvantage." Bond smiled thinly. "Bond, James Bond." The name hung in the smoky air. The woman's laugh faltered. The thug straightened. Dragon's expression shifted. Amusement, calculation. He raised his glass in mock salute. "The stories travel far, it seems. Even to Scunthorpe. Sit, Mr. Bond. Let us see what game you've come to play." Bond slid into the chair opposite. The woman leaned closer, perfume heavy enough to fight the smell of beer and steel. Bond ignored her. His eyes never left Dragon's. The game had begun. Chapter 5. The Offer. The table was sticky with beer rings, but Bond sat as if it were the best club in St. James's. He lit another cigarette, exhaled slow smoke, and let silence work in his favour. Dragon studied him. The smuggler's face was all edges, his voice smooth but cold. "James Bond, a man does not come to Scunthorpe without reason, so why are you here?" Bond shrugged lightly. "Business, same as you." The woman in red leaned close, her nails brushing the back of Bond's hand. Her voice was a whisper meant for him alone. "Dangerous business, yes?" Bond ignored her. His eyes stayed on Dragon. The smuggler chuckled, humourless. "You move like a man who carries a weapon. You drink like one too. So tell me, why Scunthorpe?" Bond smiled faintly. "Because this is where the steel is. And where the money moves, men like you follow." The faintest crack appeared in Dragon's composure. He gestured, and one of his men poured vodka into shot glasses. He slid one across the table to Bond. "Then drink," Dragon said. "To opportunity. Clever men do not waste opportunities. Perhaps you are not here to stop me. Perhaps you are here to join me." Bond turned the glass in his hand, letting the clear liquid catch the light. His voice was quiet, steady. "And if I refuse?" Dragon's smile thinned. "Then I regret it will be unpleasant." For you, his hand tapped the table twice. Both bodyguards shifted, jackets parting to reveal steel at their waists. Bond raised the vodka, downed it in one swallow, and set the glass down hard. His gaze never wavered. Regret, Bond said softly, is something you'll know sooner than you expect. The air between them tightened, sharp as wire. Around them, the club's laughter carried on oblivious, but at that table, the rules had already changed. Chapter 6. The Trap. The night air outside the club was damp, carrying the metallic tang that clung to Scunthorpe. Bond buttoned his raincoat, lit a cigarette, and let the smoke curl lazily upward. The door shut behind him, muting the jukebox and laughter. For a moment the street was quiet. Too quiet. Bond walked with measured steps, but every sense was alert. The alleys were too dark, the silence too complete. At the corner, shadows detached themselves from brickwork. 2 men ahead, 2 behind, broad-shouldered, confident. Bond flicked his cigarette into the gutter. "Evening," he said coolly. The leader hefted a length of pipe. "Dragon sends his regards." Bond's hand brushed the butt of his Walter beneath his coat. But in a deserted street, a gunshot would echo for miles. This would have to be quiet. The first thug lunged. Bond sidestepped, drove his elbow into ribs, and swept the man's legs out. The pipe clattered to the pavement. The second came in with a knife, fast and reckless. Bond caught his wrist, twisted until bone cracked, and turned the blade into the man's own thigh. A scream split the night. The third seized Bond from behind, arms crushing his chest. Bond slammed his head backwards, felt the crunch of bone, and stamped down on the man's instep. The grip loosened. The fourth swung a chain. Bond ducked under its whistle, seized the attacker's arm, and slammed him headfirst into the brick wall. He slid down with a groan. In less than 30 seconds, 4 bodies littered the pavement, groaning in pain. Bond stood in the orange glow of a sodium lamp, coat only slightly rumpled. He checked the shadows. No more. Not tonight. But Dragon had made his point. This wasn't an invitation, it was a warning. Bond lit another cigarette, exhaled slow smoke, and walked on. Scunthorpe had just declared itself a battlefield. Chapter 7. The Pursuit Through the Works. The following night, the Steelworks loomed like a living monster, towers glowing red against the black sky. The roar of furnaces and hiss of steam made the town feel alive, breathing, never sleeping. Bond crouched in the shadow of a conveyor belt, bruises from the ambush still aching. Holt's borrowed overalls hung loosely on him, and forged papers sat in his pocket. Ahead, a convoy of lorries rumbled through the gates, tarpaulins drawn tight, drivers moving with military precision, not steelworkers, soldiers in disguise. Bond slipped into the shadows, following the convoy deeper into the complex. Sparks showered from gantries above, silhouetting the trucks as they rolled towards a warehouse at the yard's edge. He moved closer, slipping through a side door left ajar. The smell of oil and dust hit him at once. Inside, crates lined the walls, stacked 3 and 4 high. Many were pried open, revealing rifles, ammunition, grenades, enough to arm a battalion. Bond crouched behind a forklift as voices echoed. Dragon entered, immaculate in a dark suit, cigarette burning between pale fingers. His men circled like obedient hounds. "This," Dragon declared, his voice carrying over the machinery, "is only the beginning. No one suspects a steel town. No one questions lorries leaving the furnaces. From Scunthorpe, the world will be supplied." His men laughed, brittle and eager. Dragon silenced them with a gesture. "London will pay. Their allies will beg, and by then our weapons will already be in place." Bond memorized every word. This was no small theft. This was a weaponized empire built from neglect. But then a guard paused by the forklift. His eyes narrowed. He leaned closer, spotting the faint glint of Bond's gaze. "Here," he shouted. Bond surged forward, yanking the forklift's lever. The machine roared to life, forks shooting up and scattering crates. Wood splintered, rifles clattered across the concrete, chaos erupted. Bond vaulted the machine, sprinting for the side door as bullets sparked off girders. He darted up a stairwell onto a catwalk high above the floor. Below, Dragon's voice cracked like a whip. "Find him! Now!" Bond moved swiftly along the metal grating, heart steady, mind calculating. He was inside the beast now, with 1,000 places to hide, and just as many to die. But for the moment the advantage was his. Chapter 8. Fire and Smoke. The catwalk trembled under Bond's boots as shouts echoed below. Dragon's men scattered across the warehouse, flashlights stabbing at shadows, voices urgent. Bond crouched by an open junction box, knife in hand. He stripped insulation, twisted 2 live wires. Sparks spat, a conveyor belt jolted into motion, spilling crates across the floor. The confusion multiplied instantly and Bond descended into the chaos, slipping between stacks of ordnance. The air was thick with oil and dust. From his pocket he drew small incendiary charges, disguised as washers, and snapped them onto steel surfaces with magnetic clicks. 3 minutes. Just enough. A guard rounded the corner, torch beam catching Bond squarely. "You!" Bond moved first. He slammed the man into a lorry, the pistol butt cracking against his skull. The torch clattered out. Bond pressed on. The first explosion came like a hammer. A fireball tore through stacked crates, lighting the rafters in a spray of sparks. Men shouted, lorries reversed wildly, tires screeching. A second charge ignited, sending a forklift tumbling end over end. Bond ran, smoke choking his lungs. Alarms wailed, bullets rattled from catwalks. Through the haze he glimpsed Dragon, coat flaring, face twisted with fury as he jabbed a finger toward Bond. "Kill him!" Bond dove behind a crate, returned fire with 3 sharp shots. 2 men dropped. Another charge went off, the pressure wave hurling Bond across the floor. His ears rang, lungs burned. He staggered up, shoulder slamming the release lever of a loading bay door. With a groan, the shutters lifted, spilling cold night air. Bond slipped outside just as the final charges tore through the warehouse. A roar of fire and steel engulfed the building, the night sky painted orange and black above Scunthorpe. He didn't look back. He was already running. Chapter 9. The Chase Along the Trent. The inferno lit the clouds crimson as Bond darted between freight wagons, the heat at his back. Sirens wailed, not just factory alarms now, but police and fire. The whole town was awake. Beyond the slag heaps lay the river. The Trent wound wide and dark under the moon, its surface glimmering faintly. Bond vaulted a fence, slid down an embankment, crouched low in the reeds. Voices carried across the night, Slavic accents, urgent. Jeep engines growled along the bank, torch beams cutting through the mist. Bond moved downstream, body low against the mud. Ahead, a wooden jetty jutted into the water, a motor launch tied loosely to its posts. He crept forward. "Stop there!" A voice rang from his left. A tall lieutenant stepped from the shadows, pistol steady. His voice was calm. "Hands up, Mr. Bond." Bond raised his left hand slowly. His right flicked a pebble into the reeds behind him. The sound drew the man's eyes for half a second. Bond dropped, rolled, fired once. The man fell without a sound. Bond sprinted for the jetty, bullets sparking in the water around him. He cut the rope, kicked the throttle open. The engine snarled. The launch leapt forward. Spray lashed his face as he steered into the current. Behind him, Jeep screeched to the bank. A second boat roared to life, sleeker, faster. Searchlights blazed, rifles cracking in the night. Bond ducked low, spray and bullets hissing past. He pushed the throttle harder, steering into the river's bend. The Trent carried him east, but Dragon wasn't letting him slip away so easily. The chase had only just begun. Chapter 10. River of Fire. The motor launch tore along the Trent, its bow knifing through black water. Spray lashed Bond's face as he hunched over the wheel, eyes scanning the river ahead. Behind, the pursuing boat closed fast, its engine tuned for speed. A searchlight blazed, blinding in its glare. Bullets stitched the water around Bond, each one hissing like an angry wasp. He swung the wheel hard, sending the launch into a spray-slinging turn. The enemy overshot slightly, but closed the gap again. Bond's eyes flicked to the riverbank. Rusting hulks of barges lay half-sunk, relics of Scunthorpe's industrial arteries. He steered toward them, weaving through broken ribs of steel and shattered timber. The pursuing boat followed, guns chattering. Bullets sparked off the hulks, ricocheted into the dark. Bond yanked a flare gun from under the seat. He braced, fired once. The red streak arced into the air, burst in dazzling crimson. For a second, the river was lit as bright as day. The enemy pilots swore, blinded. Their hull clipped a barge's jagged side. Metal screamed, the boat jolted, slowing just enough. Bond seized his chance. He swung broadside, flung a jerrycan of fuel overboard, and fired the flare into the slick. The river erupted. Flames leapt skyward, reflecting wild on the water. The enemy boat vanished in the inferno, fragments of wood and steel raining down. Bond's launch bounced in the shockwave, nearly capsizing. He fought the wheel, teeth clenched until the current steadied him. The fire burned behind, a floating pyre on the Trent. Bond pressed the throttle, carrying him into the night. The chase was over, for now. Chapter 11. The Morning After. Grey dawn settled over Scunthorpe, mist hanging low across the slag heaps and terraces. The town stirred reluctantly, sirens still echoing from the night's chaos. Bond walked the narrow streets with his collar up, blending into the weary morning crowd. He carried no case, no files, only the memory of fire and gunfire. At a corner cafe he slid into a cracked vinyl booth. The waitress poured strong tea without asking. Her hands trembled. She'd seen the glow in the sky, heard the rumours. Holt arrived a few minutes later, face pale, eyes bloodshot. He dropped heavily into the seat opposite. "You torched half a warehouse," Holt muttered. "Dragon's men are crawling everywhere. Police are spooked, management's in denial, and London—" He stopped himself, bitterness flashing. "London says to observe." Bond stirred his tea. "Observation's finished. We know the scale now. Weapons, export routes. Dragon's ambition is bigger than this town." Holt slammed his fist against the table. "You think I don't know? I've been stuck here watching him rot this place from the inside. Good men beaten, families too scared to speak." His voice dropped. "You can fly back to London when it's done, but I'll still be here." Bond studied him for a moment. Beneath the anger was exhaustion and something else, guilt. "You'll be alive," Bond said evenly. "That's what matters." Holt's laugh was harsh. Alive isn't the same as winning. He pushed back his chair, left his tea untouched, and stalked out. Bond lit a cigarette, exhaled slowly. Outside, the Steelworks roared to life again, smoke rising as though nothing had changed. But everything had changed. The war had come to Scunthorpe, and there would be no hiding from it now. Chapter 12. Harker's Watch. The pub smelled of smoke, beer, and damp wood, the kind of place where time had stopped years ago. Bond entered quietly, rain still on his coat, and scanned the room. In the corner sat a heavy-set man in a worn tweed jacket, pint untouched before him. His hair was iron grey, his face carved with lines of fatigue. Bond recognised him from Holt's dossier. Sergeant Tom Harker, retired. Bond slid into the opposite seat. "SIS speaks highly of you." Harker snorted. "Then SIS doesn't know me." He pushed the pint aside. "I policed this town 30 years. Used to drag lads out of here for brawling. Thought I was keeping order. Now we've got Bulgarians with machine guns running the docks. Makes me wonder if I wasted my life." Bond lit a cigarette, eyes narrowing. "Dragon thrives because men like you still care. Without you, there'd be nothing left worth saving." Harker studied him, measuring. "You sound like you believe it." "I do." Bond leaned in. "I need eyes inside the works. Someone who knows the faces, the alleys, the blind corners. That's you." Harker chuckled darkly. "So I play watchdog again. Difference is, last time I had a badge." He drained his pint, eyes hardening. "All right, Mr. Bond. Let's see if there's fight left in me." Chapter 13. Eliza's Choice. The Steelworks cafeteria was half empty, its fluorescent lights humming faintly. Workers shuffled through their meals, eyes down, shoulders bent. Eliza sat alone, papers spread before her. Timesheets, shipping slips, production orders. Bond slid into the seat opposite, his presence startling her. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered urgently. "And yet," Bond said calmly, "I am." She gathered the papers quickly, eyes darting around. "If Dragon's men see you—" "They won't." "Not tonight," Bond lowered his voice. "You've noticed more than paperwork, haven't you? Shipments that don't exist. Workers who disappear. Lorries that drive out full and return empty." Her face paled. "You don't understand. My brother still works those shifts. If Dragon thinks I've been talking, then he has leverage, Bond finished. He lit a cigarette, ignoring the no smoking sign. Which is why you need protection. And why you need to decide now whether you stay silent or fight. Eliza's hands trembled on the papers. For a moment she looked very young, caught between fear and resolve. But then she lifted her chin, eyes hardening. I'm in, she said quietly. But if anything happens to him... Nothing will, Bond said, his voice steady. Not while I'm here. She exhaled shakily, as though the decision itself had stolen her breath. Then I'll get you what you need. Rosters, keys, names. Bond studied her for a long moment. Brave, he thought. And far more than she realizes. Outside, the blast furnaces roared, their glow painting the night sky red. Inside, a new alliance had been forged. One fragile, one dangerous, but necessary. Chapter 14. Into the yard. Night cloaked the scrapyard in shadow. Floodlights cast hard cones across rusting heaps of twisted metal. The bones of industry piled high. Guard dogs barked from their chains, restless, sensing strangers. Bond crouched with Harker in the lee of an abandoned freight wagon. The older man adjusted his flat cap, eyes fixed on the gates. Half this place was built on stolen steel, Harker muttered. Now it hides worse. Arms, explosives, God knows what else. Bond nodded. Dragon's Empire. Eliza joined them, breath quick from nerves. She held a battered clipboard, forged work orders clipped beneath. Her voice shook, but she forced it steady. These will get us through the side gate, at least long enough. Harker gave her a sharp look. You sure about this, lass? Eliza swallowed hard. I've watched this town rot all my life. If I don't do something now, then when? Harker's expression softened, almost paternal. Fair enough. But stay behind me. They moved together, shadow slipping into shadow. At the gate, a guard waved them down, suspicion already in his stance. Bond handed over the clipboard without a word. The man squinted at the papers, then at Bond's face. Never seen you before. Bond smiled faintly. That's the point. The guard frowned, uncertain. Harker stepped forward, voice graveled with authority. Shift change. You want the foreman breathing down your neck? The guard hesitated, then waved them through with a muttered curse. The gate clanged open. Inside, the yard stretched like a graveyard of machines, shadows swallowing shadows. Beyond, the warehouse doors stood wide, light spilling out. Figures moved inside, loading crates onto trucks. The scale of Dragon's operation was undeniable. Bond glanced at Eliza. Her hands trembled, but her eyes were fierce. She had chosen her side, and there was no going back. Chapter 15. The Gathering Storm. The warehouse was alive with activity. Men in overalls moved with military precision, stacking crates, checking manifests, sealing shipments under false names. Trucks waited like wolves at the edge of the light, engines idling. Bond, Harker, and Eliza slipped behind a stack of girders, close enough to hear orders barked in Bulgarian. Dragon himself strode among the men, immaculate as ever, coat flaring in the draft. He inspected a crate, tapped the side with a knuckle, then smiled coldly. Tonight we move everything east. Tomorrow London will realize it is already too late. Bond watched him with narrowed eyes. Dragon wasn't just smuggling. He was building something larger, a network that reached beyond Scunthorpe, beyond England. Eliza leaned close, whisper trembling, That's him. Bond nodded once. Yes, and he's the reason you've been living in fear. Suddenly a worker dropped a crowbar. The crash echoed, and half a dozen heads turned. Among them, one man's eyes locked on Bond's hiding place. Suspicion flared. Harker cursed under his breath. We've been made. Bond's hand went to his Walther. Then we move now. He rose from cover, weapon leveled. The first guard barely had time to shout before Bond's silenced round dropped him. Chaos erupted instantly, men scattering, Dragon shouting orders, alarms blaring. Eliza gasped, frozen in the surge of violence. Bond grabbed her wrist, pulling her close. Stay with me. Harker swung an iron bar with surprising strength, sending another guard sprawling. His eyes burned with something fierce, not regret now, but release. Bullets sparked against steel as Bond, Harker and Eliza fought their way deeper into the maze of crates. Ahead, a stairway led to the high catwalks above the floor. Bond made the call instantly. Up there! They ran, gunfire chasing them, shadows stretching under the glare of floodlights. Above them, the steel bones of the warehouse loomed, and somewhere within, Dragon prepared to make his stand. The storm had broken. Chapter 16. The Catwalk. The warehouse roared with gunfire. Floodlights blazed, smoke curled, and the steel skeleton above echoed with the clash of boots. Bond pulled Eliza up the narrow stairwell, Harker bringing up the rear with surprising strength for his years. They emerged onto the catwalk, a narrow strip of grated metal suspended high above the floor. Below, Dragon's men swarmed, shouts echoing against girders. Bond guided Eliza behind a pillar. Stay low. Do not move unless I say. She nodded, pale but determined. Dragon appeared on the far side of the catwalk, his coat snapping in the draft. He held a pistol, but his posture was almost casual, as if the chaos around them were theatre staged for this very duel. "Mr. Bond," Dragon called, voice carrying clear, "you think you can stop what has already begun? These crates are only a fraction. Even if you kill me, the shipments continue. Scunthorpe is mine." Bond stepped forward, Walter raised. "Not tonight." Dragon laughed softly. "We are not so different, you and I. Men of discipline, of purpose. You could have ruled at my side. Instead, you'll die here among rust and fire." His pistol cracked. Bond ducked, the bullet sparking off steel inches from his head. He returned fire, driving Dragon back along the catwalk. The two men circled, shadows clashing under harsh light, shots echoing like thunder. Below, Harker laid down covering fire, keeping guards from climbing the stairwell. Dragon lunged forward, kicking the pistol from Bond's hand. It clattered across the grating, sliding dangerously close to the edge. The two men closed, fists, elbows, bone against bone. Dragon fought with the precision of a soldier, each strike efficient, brutal. Bond absorbed the punishment, countered with cold ferocity. They slammed against the rail. The steel groaned under their weight. Far below, crates burned, flames licking higher. Bond seized Dragon's arm, twisted, slammed him into the railing. Dragon snarled, eyes blazing. "You cannot kill me, Bond." "I am the future." Bond's voice was ice. "Then the future ends here." He heaved. The railing buckled. Dragon toppled backward, arms flailing, his scream lost in the roar of fire below. He vanished into the inferno, swallowed by flame and smoke. Silence lingered on the catwalk. Bond stood still, chest heaving, eyes on the fire below. Then he turned, retrieved his Walther, and moved to Eliza and Harker. "It's over," Bond said, but even as he spoke, he knew. Men like Dragon were symptoms, not causes. The disease ran deeper. Chapter 17. Ashes of Steel. By dawn, the warehouse was a ruin. Fire crews battled the last of the blaze, their hoses hissing against twisted metal. The air reeked of smoke and scorched iron. Bond stood apart, coat collar turned up, watching the wreckage. Eliza joined him, her face streaked with ash, her eyes hollow but unbroken. "He's gone," she said quietly. Bond nodded. "But others will come." "They always do." She looked at the sky where smoke thinned into pale morning. "Then we fight them too. This is still our town." Harker limped up, his tweed jacket singed, his hands filthy. Yet there was pride in his eyes, the guilt lifted at last. "I thought I'd seen the last of my fighting days. Guess I was wrong." Bond allowed himself the faintest smile. "You were the right man in the right place." Eliza turned to Bond. "And you? Will you stay?" He shook his head. "No, my battles are elsewhere. But you'll endure. Scunthorpe always does." For a moment there was silence between them, the unspoken weight of all they'd survived. Then Bond lit a final cigarette, exhaled smoke into the morning air, and walked away. A solitary figure against the blaze of a town that refused to bow. The furnaces roared back to life behind him as if nothing had changed, but for Bond, and for Scunthorpe, everything had. Epilogue. London. The office was quiet, the morning light softened by rain streaking the windows. M sat behind the great mahogany desk, papers stacked in precise order. Bond stood opposite, hands in his pockets, the faint scent of smoke still clinging to his raincoat. "So," M said, voice clipped, "Dragon is dead." The network dismantled, the steel secured. "Yes, sir," Bond replied. "Though the town paid for it. Fires, violence. Scunthorpe will be feeling the scars for some time." M's expression didn't shift. "It wasn't London that burned." Bond allowed himself the faintest smile. "No, but London nearly paid the price." He dropped a thin file on the desk. Photographs of crates, manifests, Dragon's coded notes. "That's what nearly left Britain defenseless." M studied him over her glasses. "And the people?" Bond's gaze drifted to the rain-washed skyline beyond the window. "They'll endure. Scunthorpe isn't glamorous, but it's tougher than men like Dragon ever understood. They'll rebuild." There was a pause, then M nodded once, briskly. "Very well. You'll have 48 hours leave. After that, there's a matter in the Mediterranean." Bond inclined his head. "Of course." As he left the office, he lit a cigarette in the corridor, drawing deep. His thoughts lingered not on London nor the Mediterranean, but on the red glow of furnaces, the grit of terraces, and the faces of those who refused to bow. Scunthorpe would survive. It always did. I hope everyone enjoyed reading that as much as me. I'm Zane from Zains007Fancast. Thank you all our new subscribers, and if you haven't yet, please subscribe and hit the notification button. A big thank you to Wilshie for the editing and writing. Remember, at Zains007Fancast, we do it better.